he had a lot of, for example, when he was a grown man, he found out that he had some Jewish ancestry, and
Sorry, I
from then
forgot you
on,
mentioned that. That just sounds funny.
yeah, yeah, to be honest, I would say I am like that though too. Like as soon as I find out that my grandmother was like connected to somebody from a city, I claim that, oh, I have, that heritage, But I do think he went a bit far with that, and but he did start to describe himself as a secular Jew from then on.
Stop. Okay.
But he always described himself as an anti-Zionist, although he did say, and I think he was correct up until 1990s, that at least Zionism was successful in creating a somewhat democratic and responsible state in Middle East, more responsible than some other nations surrounding it, right? But he always described himself as a anti-Zionist Jew, and he said that in many ways, what Zionism has done has repositioned anti-Semitism in a way, and he always said that, for example, you have 6 million groups of Jewish people, 6 million living in Israel, 6 million in US, and 6 million across Europe and South America, and there is one group of them that are constantly under the threat of bombing, and those are the ones in Israel because of the policies of Israeli governments. He condemned the settlement buildings. He always said that they undermine Israeli securities as well as undermining peace. At the same time, and by the way, his journalistic work besides South America and Central America he did a lot of work reporting on the Palestinian plight in Gaza and in West Bank and all that. But at the same time, though, he became increasingly critical of Palestinian authorities. He was very critical of Arafat. He described him as a fanatic and an opportunist at the same time. He was very critical of Hezbollah, describing them as a state within a state. Um, and so he was critical of both sides. And I think, I mean, it's interesting that I couldn't find a specific thing. I would have thought he would be for a one-state solution, but it seemed that at least for a while he was supporting the Palestinian cause for a statehood. But I think his take was that both sides, the leaders on both sides, Arab side and the Israeli side, and by Arab side I mean PLO, Hezbollah, and other countries. They both have failed the people of Palestine and the people of Israel to a lesser extent, significantly. So I wanted to highlight this because these days he's just viewed as this anti-religious, anti-Muslim guy who was for Iraq war and killing Muslims, and that's how he's characterized. But he was anti-Zionist, and he had a very international outlook. I'll get into why I keep emphasizing this point. Same with Kurdistan. He was always in favor of. He supported the Kurdistani people when nobody did. When American government were supporting the Saddam Hussein, who was dropping chemical weapons on Kurdish people, he supported them. He called out American foreign policies, and he was a major defender of the Kurdish rights in Iraq, to a lesser extent in Iran and in Turkey as well. But I think that's, well, like one of his that should really be highlighted, because a lot of, again, it was kind of the Russia gate of its own time. During the time when a lot of people, oh no, these are all lies, that Saddam is killing its own people and Saddam is a good guy, Saddam is a nice, dictator and all that. He was one of the few people that was standing up for Kurdish right, even when it was not popular, and even years after. So that's, I think, should be pointed out. I mentioned in his biography that for example, on the Yugoslavian issue, he was supporting a Muslim leader, Alija Izet Begovic, because he believed the best option would be a multicultural Yugoslavia where Muslims, Christians, Orthodox, Catholics, they can all live together rather than ethnic fascistic states. You know, so these were some of his famous, for example, takes on some famous issues. He was also in his early years, famously, in his early years, he was a massive critic of Henry Kissinger, foreign national security advisor and former state secretary of the United States during Nixon years, and a consultant to all presidents since. He was very critical of Kissinger. His journalistic work and his reporting work, his research, basically, he did this book called Trial of Henry Kissinger, in which he basically lays out a legal case against Henry Kissinger, accusing him of ordering assassination of Chilean military people who would have prevented coup in Chile. And like one of, by the way, his major credentials in the left is that he basically lays out the case and kind of proves that Henry Kissinger is even legally responsible for murders and for illegal activities abroad. So he's very critical of Henry Kissinger, and I highly recommend checking out that book, The Trial of Henry Kissinger. He also writes this book called No One Left to Lie to, with the tagline, No One Left to Tag to, the triangulation of William Jefferson Clinton, Bill Clinton. So this is, I think there was another tagline for the book, which was family with the worst values in America or something. This one is a big attack on Clintons and on their corrupt activities in Arkansas, and then during his presidency. He was one of the very few people at the time when the Lewinsky scandal was going on, defended Monica Lewinsky against Clinton. A lot of people that are nowadays calling themselves Me Too movements and are still having dinner with Bill Clinton and stuff. At the time they called her many negative words, including a slut, blah blah, made fun of her and stuff. He was one of the very few and very early people who defended her and described Bill Clinton as a rapist and a liar, basically. This was, by the way, I mentioned that because obviously these type of things are interesting, but obviously most of his criticisms of Bill Clinton had to do with his foreign policy, with his domestic policy, and with his corruption, basically. So, these were some of the issues he focused on. Famously, another issue he focused on, he was very anti-religious, as I mentioned in his biography. He argued and feuded with a lot of religious people, and that part of his life, I think, has been highlighted quite well enough. But I would say that he was not anti. I wouldn't say he was anti-Muslim or even Christian. He was anti-dogma, anti-fanaticism, and the people who promoted these ideas, not and I don't think I'm pretty sure he was, for example, opposed to laws in France that enforce anti-hijab laws or something like that. He was very much, in a way, he was in that sense a classical liberal, believing in personal freedoms and
But
that.
during this latter part of his career, so for instance, Sam Harris, was kind of saying the same stuff with the Iraq War. Did he have any differences with Sam Harris, because he clearly knows so much more and has such a bigger background and knowledge in these things? Did he differ with Sam Harris in any way? Did he ever say, "Okay, Sam, I agree with you on this and that about the Iraq War, but not this"?
They,
Or
oh, they, I wish, to be honest, maybe we should have rehearsed this video. But yeah, but there is actually there's a video that they discuss a specific issue and he disagrees with Sam Harris. I forget the specific issue, but I do think, yeah, they disagreed significantly. And to be honest, like I'll get in the legacy section and the, personality section, I'll get into it. But Sam Harris is, he's a neuroscientist that is, sadly, I agree
yeah,
with Abby Martin here. He's completely out of his depths. And even, even though I don't agree with Hitchens in the Iraq War, and I think he made a sort of a fatal mistake in terms of ideologically there, because he sort of, sadly, he trusted that. I made that same mistake, by the way, at the time, but I was very young. But I thought, sort of, I really,
as a 13-year-old, you made big
yeah,
mistakes.
yeah, yeah. No, no, it was a big mistake because I genuinely did it. You would think that, there was this idea that I think I like to think that it was a mistake. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was a cynical move to, I don't know, increase his audience or whatever. But he believed that whatever American government was better than Saddam Hussein. And at the time, because Iranians also had very negative views of Saddam, and I still do think Saddam was one of the worst
Of
dictators ever.
course, I
Saddam
mean,
was,
but that's not the
no, no,
point.
no, no, it is the point to an extent, though. There is a difference, in my view, between Saddam and Gaddafi.
No, but
There was
by that I mean
Saddam.
like, okay, Saddam is bad. Sure. What's your solution? I mean, if your
No,
solution,
yeah, yeah,
if what you're proposing makes things worse, thank you for your opinion. We'll
no, no,
take a
but I
seat
don't.
next.
I mean, I couldn't believe U.S. government being, a lot of people thought when U.S. is invading Iraq. I never believed the WMDs, even when I was fucking 13. I knew that that's bullshit. Like, that's obviously, they were supporting Iraq until yesterday. Now they are worried about security. Like,
But
but
so
I
you didn't
did
fall for
think,
that beautiful presentation, huh? PowerPoint
no,
slides and
no.
everything.
Colin Powell. No, but I did think they would be better than Saddam. I thought, okay, they're gonna steal oil or whatever, but there's gonna be some level of personal freedoms. And at the time, I wasn't, so familiar with, let's say, economic systems and a state economy and
Yeah.
all that. And Saddam was genuinely, like, I genuinely don't think Saddam or Hitler, for example, should be in the same category as, let's say, Gaddafi or Bashar Assad or because he was somebody who he dropped chemical weapons and biological weapons on Kurdish people, on like 30% of the populace, and he destroyed all the marshlands to get rid of Shias. He destroyed he destroyed, I believe, 15 million palm trees. He destroyed the infrastructure of Iraq, and the stories about him and his family, the corruption, the violence, and all that. So I do think, I hope it was a mistake, but I'm surprised that Hitchens in his age was, fooled, because as I got older, I realized that, yeah, American government are basically, yeah, they're not going to do another Marshall Plan ever again, and that was just for Europe, I think, at the time. But that was the thinking. But yeah, I mean, going back to your question, I
No, no.
went on a tangent, but yeah, I think he disagreed with Sam Harris on a lot of things, and the way he argued, I think that was his take on Iraq War. Not Sam Harris has a very childish view, in my view. I mean, I'm again, he's a far more educated than I am, and with far more experience.
In
So
certain aspects.
yes,
Yeah.
excuse my, I come across as very arrogant, I know, but I think Sam Harris, our arguments are somewhat naive in that it's kind of like, yeah, we have better values, or not perfect values. I don't think Sam Harris even claims that. We have better values. There are polls that show, like, Islamic societies believe in that or that, and like, it's very extremely naive way of looking at
Yeah.
things, that we have better values than this group, so we should take over them and do that. I think Christopher Hitchens did uh, approach countries on a case by case. He did it case by case, and I think in Iraq case he made a huge mistake. I hope it was a mistake. Maybe it was a cynical move, as some people call it. But and as by the way, one of his critics points out, who's I had the opportunity to meet during my university years in person, Richard Seymour. He came to our seminar, and he's a fantastic writer. He's written probably the best book that is anti-Christopher Hitchens, called Unhitched. It's a great book, The Trial of Christopher Hitchens. He kind of named it after Christopher Hitchens' own book, The Trial of Henry Kissinger. And I think that's the best, by the way, of criticisms of Christopher Hitchens. And
Sorry, he's the extremely famous journalist who also revealed a lot of atrocities related to the Vietnam War,
no, no,
right? No,
no, no.
I'm mixing.
Yeah, that's Seymour Hersh.
And his name
That's
is?
Seymour. This is Richard Seymour. He's very young. He's like 10 years older than us, perhaps. And but he's very famous too. He writes for Guardian and The Nation, and the usual route of leftist in UK and US. And I think he points out, and I'll get to this in the next segment in a major way, because that what he left. I think Hitchens had what he describes as a soft spot for the empire, and you could see it in his liking. He liked Orwell and Kipling, two writers that, while sort of lefty or liberally, also had a soft spot for the empire. Famously, Kipling was he was very nostalgic about the British Empire, and he's for example, Hitchens, kind of like Karl Marx was supportive of British Empire in India, and viewed them as a more progressive force than the local Indian governments or the Mughal Empire or whatever. And he also viewed the conquest of Britain by Rome as a positive. And basically, he was of the view that these type of things advanced. He was, again, Richard Seymour describes it as having a soft spot for the empire. I would describe it as an international outlook, but I'll get into it in the next segment, where we go focus on his move, and did he move, or why did he move, or to the right wing of the politics. But these were some of the issues that I think are less highlighted, so I thought I'd talk about them. His Zionism take, his journalism work in Palestine and in South America against Kissinger, Clinton, his support of the Kurdish people, his takes on the Bosnia situation and the Yugoslavian war.